Good morning, everybody. It's Good Friday. Happy Easter to you. Happy Passover. Ramadan is right around the corner. This is probably the holiest month for those three faiths. And I think it has something to do with spring. Spring has something to do with green buds and hopefulness. We'll be here to answer some of your questions. I've got Paul Mounds, our Chief of Staff, Deirdre Gifford, our Department of Social Services. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the spring means to me. It's a time of hope. There's been a lot of hope over the last week or so, as you've seen the fact that we maybe are beginning to bend the curve. But I also think about the other analogy as regards this virus, which is we're fighting a war. We're fighting a war against this virus. It's the invisible enemy, and we're going to win this war. And I've heard a little bit of that over the last few days. I've gotten lots of notes from folks, emails, texts saying, we have won the war. It's time for me to reopen my bar, time for me to reopen my restaurant, time for me to reopen my barber shop. The president loves to use the war analogy as well. We're winning the war, we're mobilizing for the war. And I just got to remind people that this silent enemy doesn't just surrender. It's not like Lee going to Appomattox and putting down his sword and the Civil War is over. It's not like VE Day in Europe and we bring the troops home by Easter and his happy days are here again. This virus has something to do with how we end this war and what timing we have. We have something to say about that as well. And we have something to say about that in terms of maintaining strict social distancing. I'm not going to belabor that. We have something to say about it by continuing to ramp up our testing to see who's infected and who's not infected. We have something to say about that in terms of development of vaccines. That will be how we eventually win this war. Not in time, perhaps, for this cycle of the virus, but if it came back again, we'd be better protected. And by the way, vaccines only work if everybody takes the vaccine. The Surgeon General reminded us that the flu vaccine is voluntary, and you still lose tens of thousands of people to deaths related to flu. And so we'll work on that vaccine. It works if everybody takes it. In the meantime, we're looking at the antibody testing. We've talked about that in terms of getting people back to work. And we've talked about some of the therapies, which maybe we'll see some breakthroughs over a period of time. But in the meantime, I wanted to just remind you that this is a war that is never won. It's a war that we have to figure out how we wind it down in the safest way possible for people. I know the urgency many of you feel to get back to your everyday lives, but I've got to urge you one more time, now is no time to take your foot off the accelerator. Now is no time to relax the social distancing. I want to just say one other thing before opening up to your questions. We know how contagious the virus is. Highly contagious, 10 times more contagious than the flu. You know what else is contagious? Generosity and good deeds are contagious. And this holy season, that's what I feel every day. I mean, I was just reading in The Current this morning about a young man named Tate Barnes. Did you read this article? He's in the band at Rocky Hill High School. His mom's at a senior center, and his dad's a minister. And so he wasn't able to perform at the high school, so he put together a small performance on the other side of the glass windows at the Elder Center. And dozens and dozens of seniors there were able to watch him perform Moon River with tears in their eyes. That type of good work is contagious. I love reading about the teachers across the state, teachers in Meriden, teachers in Southington, putting together car caravans, 40 cars with streamers and signs, and driving by all those homes where their students are, with their families who are cooped up, and everybody cheering from one side of the window or the other, waving, knowing that they will be getting back to school and they will be learning in a different way, but in the meantime, connecting and what that means for people. I loved hearing about, from my kids, the Facebook group called Kids Who Care. And they're posting hundreds of video clips and notes sent out to nurses and doctors and first responders saying thank you. And that means a lot to those first responders. Also means a lot to those kids, knowing what they're able to do for people. I was reading about a restaurant in Simsbury called Millwright, where they handed out hundreds and hundreds of family meals. And you know who they handed them out to? Unemployed restaurant workers, each taking care of each other. And Rondo's, I guess a pizza place in Waterbury, where they regularly deliver pizzas to the emergency room up at St. Mary's Hospital. And speaking of Waterbury, I always love Mayor O'Leary's knock and drop program, where he has hundreds of people, a lot of them young people from the Police Athletic League, who are able to deliver meals, drop it off at a senior's back step, knock on the door, and leave. But it means that senior can stay at home, and that young person is doing something really good. Masks for Heroes, did you hear about that? Able to get PPE, mainly some masks, and get those distributed. The amount of folks that are beginning to contribute. We got 4CT, raising lots of money to help put people back to work and helping to help our amazing not-for-profits out there. These are all the green shoots of what this weekend means for me, what this weekend means for the state of Connecticut. And if we stay the course, we stay strict about our social distancing, and remember all the good things that are going on, remembering how contagious that is, that's how we do eventually win this. You know, with that, we've got Deirdre Gifford here. Deirdre, as you maybe know, runs Department of Social Services. As I mentioned before, here to answer any questions you have. They serve over 1 million people here in the state of Connecticut. That includes expanded services for Medicaid and taking care of the poorest and making sure they get protection from this COVID crisis. And SNAP, what that means in terms of food and food insecurity. All the other social services and energy relief programs that we have out there. And again, Paul Mounds will give you an update on what else we're trying to do. With that, Max, are there any questions?
Sure, we can start with the Hartford Courant.
Hello, Governor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I had a question for Commissioner Gifford. On April 1st, the governor put out a press release about the opening up these COVID recovery homes or COVID-only homes for nursing homes, whatever you want to call them. And there had been 13 deaths in nursing homes at that point. As of last night, there are 116, and as far as I know, we still haven't got any of these facilities open or ready to go. Can you give us a little idea of why it's taken so long, where it's at, and when we're actually going to get one of these places open? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As you indicated, we are working in partnership with the Department of Public Health to support the nursing home industry in coping with this emergency and these infections. As you indicate, individuals residing in nursing facilities are particularly vulnerable, and that's why the Governor and the Department of Public Health and DSS have been working together to set up these facilities. They contain two different types of responses. One is nursing homes that are currently operating who are transitioning to become COVID recovery facilities. And the other is new facilities that are being stood up in existing buildings that were previously nursing homes in most cases and are being reopened to help transition individuals out of the hospital as they continue to recover from a COVID infection. There are a number of steps that needed to be taken to get those facilities stood up. They are in process. We are working every day with the Department of Public Health. As soon as they identify a place that's ready to go, We are working on notifying residents and families, notifying local officials, and getting payments in place that will support these facilities. So the process is ongoing. Each day, more progress is being made, and new potential sites are being investigated and identified by the Department of Public Health.
Max, can I follow up with the commissioner?
Sure, go ahead.
Is it a financial issue with dealing with the nursing homes, or has it been finding providers to do it? Or, I mean, we're now 9 days in and it doesn't seem like one of these is ready to go yet. What has been the biggest issue or the biggest problem?
It's not a financial issue. Working with Secretary McCaw and the governor's leadership, we have been able, as you know, to establish enhanced rates for these facilities. And we've worked with the owners and operators to get agreement on those rates. And we're ready to put those in place. So the financial issues have largely been addressed. There are issues, a lot of issues around making sure that the staffing is appropriate, that staff have the personal protective equipment that's necessary, that all the appropriate notifications are made to residents and families, that equipment is put in place. So there are a number of steps that need to be taken. I want to assure everyone that there has been a lot of progress in the last week in getting these facilities stood up, and actually in the last several weeks. So the beds are becoming available, there's equipment being delivered, and lots of progress has been made.
Moving on to the Connecticut Mirror. We'll move along next to NBC Connecticut.
Good morning. My first question has to do with a tweet that you received of a Connecticut company. Can you hear me okay?
Sort of.
Okay. So this tweet that you received from the president of a Connecticut company, to yourself and also to Mayor Bronin, said that he has a relative that has access to 10 million 3M and 95 masks. Wondering if you had a conversation with him and if you're still looking for more PPE and you have a big shipment coming next week.
If I heard the question correctly, you know of somebody, we got an email saying they have access to lots of N95 masks, and perhaps why aren't we buying them from them? And all I can tell you is that, as you saw, we've had well over 1,000 of these offers come in. And we do have to vet them because by far most of them are friends of friends or brokers or overseas or money up front or send it to the Cayman Islands. And so we're very careful about this. This probably sounds like a very reputable group. That said, I got to tell you, we have leveraged every one of those important relationships. You heard yesterday from Josh. We have millions of dollars of orders, not only out there, but the PPE beginning to come in now and beginning to get that distributed. So we make sure that we have a capacity for all of our first responders, not just our hospitals.
And Governor, this is more of a personal matter. I heard you on the radio this morning with Christina 95 FM, and you said that you planned on gathering your whole family on Easter. When I hear whole family, I think aunts, uncles, cousins. Just wanted to clarify that the executive order of no social gatherings of 5 or less does apply to holidays like Easter.
It does, and there are no aunts, uncles, or cousins coming.
So health experts have suggested that when you do have such social gatherings that are of 5 people or less, it's only your immediate family, only the people that you actually live with. Do you agree with that? And will you be encouraging Connecticut residents for these holidays only to gather with the people they live with?
Yeah, that's my strong recommendation. Look, Grandma may live at home. Everybody has different circumstances. You know, my worship service on Sunday is going to be by streaming video. And that's what I strongly recommend. And next Easter, you'll be back in that church or wherever you worship.
Okay, thank you. Happy Easter.
Same to you.
Remind all participants to mute your devices until you're called on to answer or ask a question. We'll move on next to News 8. News 8? Okay, we will move on next to the Waterbury Republican American.
Hi, Max. Thanks. I had a question for the commissioner. Can you give us an idea of how things are going in terms of the processing of SNAP applications? How many are you getting now? Certainly there's been a spike in unemployment benefits, and I understand the number of daily applications has tripled.
Yes, thank you. We have seen a large increase in application volume for our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which used to be called food stamps. Since February, our daily application volume has approximately quadrupled. So we are seeing lots of new interest in the program. We are required to process expedited applications within a week. We have to date been meeting that time frame. We're required to process regular applications but in a month, and we are exceeding that time frame and still processing well under that 30-day requirement. We are seeing longer wait times on our phone lines, and I want to assure the public that we are doing everything we can to increase the capacity of our team out in the field to respond to phone calls. We've transitioned hundreds of workers to telework, and I want to really thank the DSS field team for all of their very hard work, and our IT team for standing up that new technology. But because of the volume, we have seen longer wait times on the phone, and I just want to let everyone know that we are working very hard to increase our capacity, get more people on the phones. We're ordering new technology. We're shifting workers to be on the phones. So we are still processing and getting our benefits out in a timely fashion, and we're working very hard to bring down those wait times on the phone lines.
Well, how long is it taking to get the benefits out with the expedited applications and with the other applications?
Less than a week for the expedited applications.
And the others can take as long as 30 days?
That's our federal time frame. We're getting them done right now in about 12 to 14 days. I also want to remind folks that in addition to SNAP, if people are looking for health insurance, that Husky is available year-round. And if you have lost your health insurance and you want to apply for Husky, you can go to ct.gov/DSS, find out if you're eligible. In partnership with our colleagues at Access Health Connecticut, can find out if you're eligible for Husky, usually within 24 hours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move along next to News 8.
Hi, Governor. It's Jody. Can you hear me okay?
Your audio is muffled, so we're going to move along to another reporter, and we will come back. Connecticut Mirror.
Hi, I got tossed off the call for technical issues, so if this has been asked, forgive me. But Governor, at the top, you talked about sort of the reaction you're getting from restaurant owners and others who are suggesting it's time to reopen. I'd like to ask you a question I asked you early in this crisis, which is, can you articulate the standards, the metrics that will guide you to say when it is the right time to ease some of these social restrictions?
Yeah, I'm really relying on the healthcare experts, but looking at when we think we have this virus contained, when I think I can test workers and know that they're safe to go back to work and won't be able to infect others. When I know that we will have the thermometers so we can test people who involve more social interaction going in and out of stores. I think we've seen that done very successfully in South Korea and some other places. But it just was ironic that the restaurants asking to open at the same time the CDC says everybody in a tight area should wear their masks. So I'm going to do this purely based upon public health. And I say we're never going to get this economy going again unless we make sure that we do it on a safe basis and we don't have a false start, which we worry about.
Governor, and you've been very clear that public health is going to be what guides you. What I think people are struggling with a little bit is, have you received any guidance about what that's going to look like specifically as far as caseloads, as far as hospitalizations? Again, are there any metrics that CDC or others have given you that will point you to the moment when it's okay?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Paz. Right now, the CDC has been silent on this, but I do know they are looking into this and trying to come up with some metrics. Obviously, every region is going to be quite different in terms of the infection rates and the such. You know, we're, Southern Connecticut in particular is part of that hot zone that includes the New York metro area. But for me, the number one metric is hospitalization. That seems to be a template for what's going on more broadly in terms of infections throughout the community. And secondly, a real testing regimen to make sure that people are safe when they get back to work.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move along next to Hearst, Connecticut Media.
Thanks, Max. Hi, Governor. You know, I think you can take anonymous Twitter trolls for what they're worth, but on the issue of reopening, I've noticed in the last 24 hours some partisan comments emerging from the other side of the aisle. I wanted to know what your feeling is about that.
My feeling is this has been a nonpartisan pandemic, and I've really been proud that the legislative leaders and here in this building have been working, arm in arm. And obviously, as we fight through this virus and people see these green shoots, maybe there'll be some comments made here and there. Why don't we open up faster? Why don't we open up tomorrow? But I think right now we're in strong communication on a regular basis, and I think people feel pretty confident that we're on the right track, have the right balance between getting this economy going with the first priority on public safety.
Last night in your release after dark, you were talking about 400,000 tablets of hydroxychloroquine. Who's going to decide how that's going to be used? The effects seem to be inconclusive. Where's this stuff going to be, and who's going to use it?
Hi, it's Paul Mounds. To your question, that donation that was provided to the state of Connecticut through DCP is going to go directly to the hospitals. So the actual doctors will be the one making those decisions on how that drug in particular would be prescribed to the patient who are dealing with COVID-19.
And it's for lupus, it's for malaria, it's for arthritis, as well as a possible palliative for COVID. And exactly. It's the doctors who make that determination.
Thanks, Governor.
We'll move on next to the Associated Press. Sue Haig.
Good morning, Governor. How are you?
Hey, Sue.
I understand, I thought you guys were going to be coming out with some sort of program regarding helping renters. Could you talk about that, please? And also, are you going to be issuing an executive order concerning bars and restaurants to continue them being closed until May 20th?
Hi, Sue. Today, the governor will be issuing an executive order on renters assistance, which would do the following. One, landlords will not be able to issue a notice to quit or serve summary notice, basically eviction proceedings, before July 1st, except for serious issues of nuisance or harming that occurs between the tenant and the landlord. In addition, the April rent for renters, they will be provided an automatic 60-day grace period. Third, on the May rent there will be a 60-day grace period upon the tenant's request to their landlord. So in addition, as it deals with that, the tenant will have to notify their landlord that they have lost a job, lost hours, or otherwise lost revenue, or significantly had increased expenses as it dealt with because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, as it deals with security deposits for the tenants, if it has been paid of more than 1 month's rent, can be applied to all or part of their April, May, or June rent. We will be putting out that executive order later today. And then on your second question on the extensions for bars and restaurants, we will be putting out an executive order in accordance with the governor's executive order that he did yesterday on schools, in which we will be extending all of our social distancing measures per executive order and extending that to May 20th. And that will include restaurant, bars, private club operations, off-track betting facilities, gyms, sports, fitness, recreational facilities, large shopping malls, places of public amusement, as well as we will be extending our measures as it deals with the safety and distancing measures for workplace and non-essential businesses.
Hey, so I'll just add to that, if I could, that doing something for the renters was really important to me. Working with the banks and folks who have a home with a mortgage, we were able to get that grace period, and that was really important. Working with our senators and what we're able to do for small business and giving them relief in terms of either the rent they're paying or the interest they've got on their building was really important. But there was a group that we were leaving out. And folks that in those areas that are predominantly renters, what can we do for them? They're the ones just as likely to have lost all sources of income. So we work very closely here to get this executive order out that at least gives people a 90-day break and a breather until we get this economy going again, or at least until we get those other supports going from the federal government.
And just a quick follow-up. What about the landlords? Will there be any assistance for them? Because this sounds like that they would take a hit. Thank you.
As you know, in our previous orders, there have been various assistance that have been provided for landlords, particularly dealing with their own financial situation. So we really much believe that the previous orders took care of landlords and various property owners. As the governor stated, we wanted to make sure we got it right and working with the various partners to ensure that we took care of those who are renting in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you.
Well, we'll move along next to News 12.
Hi, Governor. Good morning. I just kind of want to ask you about nursing homes real quick. I know we talked the other day about doing better in terms of PPE and other equipment. We continue to hear from multiple nurses every day about facilities that don't have the appropriate mask or gowns or gloves. Can you or the DSS commissioner speak to exactly what the state is doing to try to get those materials into these homes and make sure that they have enough of them?
Yeah, I'll start it off, then I really love Deirdre to answer that question. And John, I hope you're feeling good, man. Give us leads on those particular nursing homes. As we've said over the last few days, we're in very close contact. We're getting PPE out. Most of them have to manage it because we don't have the supply today that we're going to have in next week, so we'll even be able to get more out there. But if there's some that are having a harder time managing their supply, let us know who they are. We can talk to them and maybe get them some additional support. Deirdre?
Thank you. Yes, we have ramped up the communication between the Department of Public Health, our workforce, and labor out in the nursing homes, and the unified command structure to make sure that the lines of communication are fully open, as the governor stated. We understand that these workers are also on the front lines. It's very important to us that we know what the supplies are and that we are working to get those supplies out. Some deliveries were made yesterday, and those will be ongoing as we get supply into our warehouse. And as I stated, we have ramped up the lines of communication to make sure that the state is fully aware of where the most pressing needs are.
We'll move on next to Fox 61.
Hi, Governor. We've seen nearly 24 cases at Electric Boat now. Are enough precautions being taken for our government contractors?
Probably not. I've certainly talked to Kevin Graney about this before he, in fact, found that he was infected with COVID. I know what they're doing in terms of social distancing there. I know what they're doing in terms of having everybody self-monitor, take their temperature before going to Electric Boat. I did talk to Secretary of Defense Esper about this very specifically, I think, earlier this week probably, and said it's really important that defense prioritize these frontline workers. You know, we're under a legal obligation to get you, in this case, submarines per a contract. So you should prioritize getting us the thermometers we need, the testing kits we need, and probably the Abbott Lab instant tests. That should be a priority for these defense workers, just like it is for me with all of our first-line responders at the hospital.
And was there any word on whether they were going to provide those supplies? Have you heard back?
I've not heard back from the Secretary of Defense, but I know we're in close contact with EB, and if they can't source the supplies, we're going to get them the supplies out of some of our early loads of PPE that start coming in next week.
And if I could just follow up really quick, would this apply to Pratt & Whitney and Sikorsky and some of our other contractors in the state?
Yeah, it does. As you know, by law, they have to stay open. They're called critical infrastructure. And but we've got to do a better job of monitoring. We can do that. These are sort of contained areas. We know who goes in and who goes out. You know, I mentioned that Stanley Black & Decker with 30,000 workers around the world have had 4 infections. That was as of a few days ago anyway. So with really tight monitoring, we can keep these people safe.
Thank you, Governor.
In addition to that, our Department of Economic and Community Development Commissioner David Lamont, under the governor's executive order, created workplace guidelines for these particular establishments and operations. But to also go to the governor's fact, he had direct conversations with the Secretary of Defense on this very matter, and we will be following up directly back with them on it. And as we said, if they will not provide it, we will provide it.
We'll move along to the day.
Hi, Governor. It's Julia Bergman with Today. I have a question also about nursing homes. Will you be publishing the numbers of confirmed cases and deaths for each nursing home? And if not, why not?
Yeah, why aren't we already doing that, Paul?
Yeah, we are working thoroughly with the various processes to do that. We expect that that will be put out thoroughly, publicly in next week.
Moving on to Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Susan.
I just had a question for Commissioner Giffords. As you know, a lot of families now are, this has been a very difficult time. They can't see their loved ones. Are we going back, do you think, the way things were, or do you think some of the social protocols that have been in place over the past few weeks, that things will change at some of these facilities?
I believe we may have lost Commissioner Gifford.
Okay.
It's not personal, I promise. We're going to try to get her back on the line.
But I'll try an answer to that question, Sue, because it's a really good question. You know, it broke my heart. We were one of the first states to say no visitors to nursing homes, just because we saw what had happened in Kirkland, Washington. We knew what an incredible risk it was in terms of contagion and infection. We're doing everything we can in terms of FaceTime, real-time conversations, telephone, everything we can to maintain that communication, that touch between a family and a loved one in the nursing home. But I do not anticipate changing those protocols anytime soon.
The other question I had was more on, eventually, and I'm not sure if we're ever going back to normal, but we are going to start opening things up. how do you know? What has to happen? I mean, you hear all the time that coronavirus is really not going away ever, and that we could see a resurgence in the fall, and that it's part of where we are in the world. So what has to happen before you feel confident enough to open everything back up and make changes?
Yeah, and Paz asked the same question. To me, I can look at the broad metrics. I can look at hospitalizations. If they go down dramatically, I can assume that perhaps there's less infection in the broader community. But I just don't think that's going to be good enough. We're really going to ramp up our testing protocol, both in terms of the real-time Abbott lab tests, and just as importantly, get those antibody tests out there so we know for sure who is safe, who has built up the immunity, who has the antibodies, so they can get back to work. And I think we got to start on that this month.
And I guess I had one other question, and that is, I don't think, Connecticut or any other state has not seen this many unemployment claims. I mean, it's really mind-boggling when you see how many people are applying. Do you think it's going to be enough what the state is doing right now and the federal government is doing, or do you think more needs to be done, certainly on a state level with legislative input, because these are people who are going to be out of work, and let's face it, I don't think these companies are just going to go back online at full capacity.
Yeah, two questions I heard there, Sue. One on the unemployment. I really hope that the federal government doesn't make that a loan to the states, but makes that a grant to the states. If we have to pick up all these costs, even though it's low interest loans from the feds, that will really hit unemployment costs across the country for businesses that have to pay that. And I've talked to our legislative congressional delegation about that in no uncertain terms. Number two, and I was talking to Senator Murphy about this just last night, what the feds have done with their CARE Act, which is really helpful, is reimbursing us and hospitals for COVID-related expenses, and cities and towns for COVID-related expenses. But as Melissa McCaw, OPM will tell you, 90% of our shortfall, that $500 million shortfall we anticipate at the end of this fiscal year, June 30, is related to a loss of revenues. Obviously, not much sales tax revenues coming in right now. And it's really important that the feds make some good faith effort to reimburse the states and the municipalities for lost revenue as well. And I'm hearing the same thing from the hospitals. Not only are they ginning up a lot of overtime, but their revenues are down dramatically, especially their most profitable revenues, which are the elective surgeries. So they're going to need some help more than just reimbursement to make up for their difference. And finally, what I was talking to our senators about is I really hope that an infrastructure bill is a big part of the next bill coming out of Congress. Everybody knows the nature of our infrastructure. I won't belabor that here as regards Connecticut, but now is the time for them to be planning that so that we can get people back to work in a serious way. And these are big outdoor construction projects where you can work, I think, safely earlier in the process. And what I've done about that is in our bond bill, which we're now going to have the meeting next week as opposed to this week, is put in place several major design operations so that when and if that transportation infrastructure bill comes out of Congress, we're going to be first in line.
We'll move on next to CT News Junkie.
Good morning, Governor. I have two questions, one political, one not so political. The first question is the political one. Bernie Sanders suspended his presidential campaign this week, but has refused to take his name off the ballot. Are you going to be taking any action to cancel the presidential primary here in Connecticut?
I hope not. I just think that sets a bad precedent, but obviously I'm getting a lot of feedback on that subject. You know, we have several other options, though. One, we have a June 2nd date, along with a number of our neighboring states. We can put that off until, say, July. I know a number of the governors are considering that, thinking that the situation might be mitigated by then. Obviously, the Secretary of State thinks this may be a good time for voting by mail. That's got some controversy here in the building. So there are a couple of options we have, but I think just canceling the primary is not the right way to do it.
And my second question is about nursing homes. We know that nursing home workers and just home health aid workers are paid, are low wage workers and often have two jobs. Are we tracking the nursing home workers and home health aid workers who go from home to home, literally from nursing home to nursing home, and from personal home to personal home? Is there any tracking of that being done?
Deirdre, do you know that?
Hi. I know that as part of the overall nursing home surge plan, that this is an issue that the Department of Public Health is working on. As you state, it's an important issue for the frontline workers in the nursing facilities because many of them rely on multiple jobs. And I just want to acknowledge those frontline workers, thank them for the work that they are doing on behalf of the residents of the nursing facilities, and really applaud them for all of their hard work during this emergency. But we also know, to your point, that it is important that that we not transmit the COVID infection from facility to facility. So there's been a lot of guidance put out by the Department of Public Health. Their facilities and licensure group is working very hard with the nursing home industry and with labor to try to address this issue, making sure that people, as we spoke about earlier, both have access to the correct personal protective equipment, but also understand the guidelines for when it should be used.
Is there any tracking of the personal protective equipment that each nursing home has?
Did you say tracking of the PPE?
Correct. Yeah, PPE.
Yes, I know that the Division of Facilities and Licensure, working in partnership with the Unified Command, has been setting up strategies by which the facilities can report if they have issues with their PPE supply. We also, as you may know, have a nursing home mutual aid plan through which facilities can report particular needs and share amongst themselves and work with the Department of Public Health. So I believe that system has also been invoked to try to address some of these concerns.
We'll move along next to News 8.
Hi, Governor. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Thank you. It's Jody Latina. I just wanted to ask, and if this is a question for the commissioner, that would be great. What is the face of the Connecticut resident who is now calling DSS looking for help? Has it changed over the last month?
Could you hear that, Deirdre?
I did, yes. Thank you for the question. While we are seeing a lot of new applicants, both for Husky and for SNAP benefits. So we haven't had time, obviously, as we've been really busy processing these applications, to do a deep dive into how the individuals applying may be different from those who are traditionally among our million clients that we serve. We imagine that these are people who are newly, have seen a drop in their income and newly eligible for these programs. That's what they're there for. This is what SNAP and Medicaid were designed for, to help out when people find themselves in times of need. So they can be temporary benefits, and they're here for when people need them, and then when they are back on their feet, they can transition off.
Let me just say in closing that I wish each and every one of you and your families all the very best, especially for this weekend. This is a month of some hope, I think. Spring brings hope, and the holiest season brings hope. Act carefully, act responsibly, and we pray for each and every one of you. Thanks.